Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello, everybody. What if I told you that sometimes life's greatest plot twists aren't endings, but beginnings in disguise? Today on Authors on Mission podcast, we're diving deep with somebody who's turned her life's most challenging chapters into a blueprint for empowerment. Meet Shaunna Lee, a woman who didn't just survive 3 divorces, but has alchemized them into wisdom, strength, and a thriving business that's helped countless others rewrite their own stories. Her book, So You're Divorced, So What? Isn't another self-help guide. It's a defiant declaration that your story isn't over when one chapter ends. This story is all about the art of transformation, and today we're going to be talking about the secrets of how any of us can turn our deepest struggles into our greatest strengths. So, whether you're navigating a major life transition or simply ready to step into the fullest version of yourself, this conversation will light a fire under your own mission to become the author of your best life. Without further ado, Shaunna, welcome to the Authors on Mission podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I'm looking forward to chatting all about you and your life and ultimately the book and the writing process. So Help us a little bit more. What was that moment that inspired you to write the book? What led you to that point in life where you decided, you know what, I got to get these tips down on paper?
Yeah, I never set out to write a book on divorce. So it was kind of an interesting journey to get here. I've always wanted to write a book. I've got at least 6 more in me at some point. I loved the idea of becoming an author. However, when the idea for this book came to me, I fought it a little bit. So it actually was in meditation that I heard write the book. And the idea of writing a book about divorce at that point after my 3rd divorce I fought it tooth and nail. Like many women, after my last divorce, especially a 3rd divorce, I was filled with shame and guilt, and I was embarrassed to admit to people that I had been divorced 3 times. I like to tell people I was like Ross Geller from Friends, that I was going to fight that last divorce. And when you know it, life happens, and I was a single mom once again. I actually had been let go from 2 corporate jobs in a single year. And so I had this whole kind of journey that I was like, well, what am I really doing with my life? I said I wanted to write books. I wrote a children's book, never did anything with it. I wrote a novel, it still has not been published. And then the idea for this book came, and it really was a moment for me to turn an embarrassing plot twist, if you want, my own life, and this idea that being divorced 3 times was this super negative aspect of who I was, and really changing the narrative around who I am and what I learned from it. And so it was really just kind of an awakening journey. And I tell people it's the prettiest divorce book you'll ever read, because divorce is such an ugly topic and still in many ways very taboo, and people suffer silently or with their therapist, but people aren't necessarily out there talking about it. And I thought, well, if I have gone through every type of divorce that there has to be some good that can come from that. And so I turned it into a guide to help people put their life back together after they end up divorced.
Wow. Well, that's a really inspiring story. And there's nothing like, taking something that is usually so difficult and challenging and turning it into something that other people can learn from and putting a positive spin on it. And I think it's beautiful that you said it's a beautiful book. And I definitely agree with that. It's a great way to put a positive spin on it. One of the things I noticed is when I was looking through your book, you mentioned that one of the most common things you try to do is to turn your relationship with your ex into something easy and smooth. I'm wondering, is that realistic for most people? Is that something that you've got a lot of feedback the readers have been able to implement since reading your book?
So I would say it is vastly realistic for the majority of people who would be reading this book. I had a very typical, tumultuous post-divorce relationship with this man I used to be married to. And At one point, I just decided that, now again, I had been divorced once before with children. And so I had done everything wrong in that situation. And I did not want for my smallest children that same experience that my older girls went through. And so I very much on purpose said, okay, how can I do this different? How can we set ourselves up to co-parent these children well together? And in the process, we have transformed our working relationship. I call it a working relationship because we still have to get along with each other, so to speak. We have to be cordial. And so I really on purpose changed the dynamic of that relationship. And the reason I say it's realistic for everyone is because I was the one who did that. He did not change who he is. He still shows up the same person that he always has been. And the way he reacts to conflict, the way he handles, conversations, he's not changed. The only thing that changed was me and how I was interacting with him and the things I chose to respond to and how I responded. And so, I think everybody has control over themselves. And that really is the only thing that you can control in that scenario. I wrote the book for women. So I would say a lot of women who read this book, they're in the same spot where it is highly emotionally charged. And there are lots of, if we're talking to children, there's lots of big feelings involved. And I just like to remind everybody, especially when there's children involved, to keep them at the forefront of every conversation you're having and think about it from the perspective of what is best for your children. And that usually is a really good guiding light for how you can maneuver certain situations. And it's worked well for me.
I think at the end of the day, what you're saying here then is, you can't try to change things that can't be changed, right? You have to focus on what you are able to change, such as yourself.
Exactly.
Exactly. You can't control what your ex says. You can control how you interact with him. And once you take this first step, I'm assuming, and really, begin taking the driver's seat in the conversation, that's when you can make these transformations. And I think that's a really bold and empowering thought that carries through your book.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think everything I do, so I'm a podcast host as well, and it's called Empowered Endeavors. So everything I do is from the lens of empowering someone to take control of their life and make it what you want it to be. And we can have these horrible things happen to us, and we can be presented with situations that we wouldn't choose, but there is an opportunity there to make it into something good. And that is what the whole book is about.
Definitely. And you have to take care of those opportunities, because if you don't, at the end of the day, want to be, dwelling on it and making control the rest of our lives, we want to make it into something better that we can move on from. And I think that's an amazing thing in your book as well. And also, kind of branching off of this, you did mention that the book you wrote ended up becoming the catalyst for your entire business now, which I think is very interesting for all listeners today. We're all aspiring authors, or maybe we have a book out there, and a lot of times books do end up being the stepping stone for something much bigger. If you don't mind sharing a little bit about that journey for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, what a journey it has been. Definitely has not ended where I thought it was going to go. Writing a book about divorce definitely had the potential to kind of send me down this niche of divorce. I've been a consultant for my whole career, and so it was natural that my coaching would be more consulting. And it took me a little bit to be able to marry my corporate experience and this desire to help people with this deeply emotional situation and kind of figure out what that was. And it did become the catalyst for my entire business, in that most of my consulting right now is around my podcast launching program. It's called Pod Launch. And I teach people how to start a podcast in under 30 days. It really is less about the podcast being the only product, but really when people are coming out of divorce, there's this opportunity to go do something great. And almost every single person I have talked to has this secret wish, dream in the back of their mind, some endeavor that they want to do, whether it's write a book or start a podcast or start a business. I help them do that. And that's what the podcast is all about, empowered endeavors. So I'm empowering you to go do the thing that you want to do that has been whispering to you. And then I've created, courses around supporting those different endeavors.
That's incredible. And it's wonderful that you're able to empower others in such a way. And these courses, are these live courses? Are these ones that people can kind of flip through in their own time? I'm just kind of curious how you set that up.
So it's interesting because most of my courses begin as a live taught program, and then they are recorded. And then I'm a big fan of repurposing content. So say it once, record it, share it many times. And so at this point, every course I have as an offering is pre-recorded. And so they're self-paced. I've got one on co-parenting. I have one on dating after divorce. I have one on launching a podcast. And so it really is a multi-week process where I take you through my process to ignite your brilliance in whatever way that is.
That's beautiful. And, you mentioned all about repurposing content. I think that's something that a lot of authors could, learn from as well. Many of us write our books and we think, that's it. There's my book. It's on the shelf right there. But if you do it strategically, like you've learned, Shaunna, you're able to turn it into many different platforms and mediums. I'm wondering if you have any tips for doing so for our audience today.
Absolutely. So, I've been living in podcast world for the last few years, and a book is an amazing piece of content to create a podcast from. As an example, you could very easily pull components out of your book, and that becomes your episodes. Even just talking about the book and applying it to real life situations, or bringing on clients of mine as an interview on the podcast. There's all sorts of ways that you can utilize a book as your piece of content to then become shared content elsewhere. Social media is a great one as well. Like once you've created the content, use it and share it. I don't know about most of your listeners, but for me, writing the book was one thing. Selling the book has been quite another endeavor altogether. And so being able to find ways to repurpose the content that you've already created, you poured your heart into creating a book. Now it's time to go share it.
Definitely. You might as well make the most of it to share it in as many different ways you can. And, that's how you not only expand your audience, expand your reach, but also, you're spreading your message. And it's so much better. So, moving on from this a little bit more, I'm wondering if you could chat a little bit about the writing process itself. For example, you did mention you started by writing a children's book, then a novel, then nonfiction. So is there something that each genre taught you something different about storytelling? Which one to you was called to you the most?
So my children's book was actually, it really was just a story that I was telling my son at bedtime. And it started as a verbal story. And I finally put it down on paper. And then, of course, he's a teenager now. And so I quit telling the story. But it was kind of my first little attempt. And mostly because I thought, writing a children's book will be easy. Turns out it was not easy. And so I learned a little bit about how difficult the creative writing process is for me. And having written fiction and nonfiction at this point, they are very different approaches for me. So I think in a lot of ways, writing my novel was me learning my writing process. It took me 18 months to write that story, beginning to end. And I think it really was just about, learning how I can on purpose sit down to write and create pages. At the time that I was writing my novel, because it was a creative writing, I was waiting for these moments of creative inspiration to hit before I would sit down to write. And therefore, it took me a long time to finish the book. My nonfiction book was a little bit easier in that there was structure and an outline, and I kind of knew where I was going. Every time I sat down to write a new chapter in my novel, I would sit down with the intention that, this is where these characters were going. And then next thing I knew, they turned left and the story went where it was going to go. And that was very different from my nonfiction experience, because that was a little more analytical. And I was pulling definitely heartfelt stories and emotion into the writing process, but it was much more analytical for me. And so that moved much faster. And it was also a shorter book. So That was a very long answer, but yes, I learned lots in the different writing processes.
Yeah, and I think anybody can learn from any type of writing experience, of course, whether you're journaling or writing notes or, of course, children's books, nonfictions, fiction. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. It definitely, there's always something to be learned. So I was looking through your book a little bit, and you mentioned in the book the idea of letting go of anger and shame once and for all. It's something you promised the readers. So we've talked about this a tiny bit in this, but I'm wondering if there's any tips that you might want to offer our audience today, right now, an approach to helping others release those heavy emotions, maybe a sneak peek to what you do offer in your book and your course.
Yeah, I have a whole chapter on grief in the book. And first and foremost, I think we do grief really poorly in our society. And most people suffer in silence and suffer alone. And what I talked about in that book is all the different stages of grief, which most people have heard that there's different stages and you kind of move through them. I think a healing journey of any kind is very similar in that it's not linear. It's not you go through one step, then you move to the step 2 and then step 3 and step 4. It's not linear like that. It's up and down and back and forth. And, 1 minute think that you're doing great and the next minute you're in tears and not even knowing, necessarily where it came from. Anger is just one of those steps in the grief process. And it is critical to people being able to heal and move forward after divorce. First and foremost, you can't let go of anger until you've actually expressed it and felt it and be angry about the scenario and all the ways that you feel wronged or that it was unfair or whatever the case may be. You're entitled and encouraged by me in this book to feel angry. And then once you're able to sit with the reasons you're angry and express it, and there's all sorts of ways. Journaling is one of my favorite ways to kind of work through. Obviously, as a writer, I like writing, so it's a really healing process for me. And sometimes that can be, writing a letter to the person and all the things that you would like to say, and then you don't send it. And so I think just being able to express the anger and then not stay there. That is the place that I see a lot of divorced women get stuck. And that is in the angry, bitter, it's all his fault phase. And so what I encourage people to do in the book is, yes, be angry, but also let it go and let it not sit with you, because all you're doing is a disservice to you and your children when you stay bitter and angry. And so being able to let go of those big emotions frees you up to be the happier person that you deserve to be, but mostly your children deserve to have a happier mom.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, when you free yourself of those emotions, then you're more open to positive ones from your children and from other people in your life. And I definitely see where you're going with that. That's an amazing thing we should all be holding on to. So, Shaunna, you mentioned, you're in the podcasting world, you have a couple books out. What's next for you now? I'm wondering if you have another idea for a book or if there's anything else on the horizon that we might be looking forward to in terms of. Yeah, please share with us.
So I am going to write my next book. So I hope to take everything that I've learned from those previous experiences and write much faster. And I'm hoping that I will finish a manuscript by the end of this year. We're recording in May. And so I've got half a year to finish a book. And I wanted to write 2 books last year. I didn't write one. So we'll see where it goes. But it really will be walking people through my process, which is to ignite your brilliance and to encourage you to do the thing that you've been wanting to do and kind of walk them through what that process is that I take my consulting clients through.
Okay, perfect. That's really exciting to walk them through the process and getting to know a little bit about everything else. So I guess it's more of a deep dive for that. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And where can we perhaps get in touch and stay up to date with when this might be released? And also, where can we connect to check out all these other materials that you have out there?
Yeah, I'm super active on LinkedIn. I love for people to come connect with me directly there, Shaunna Lee. And there's links, to everything that I'm doing there. I post regularly about all of these empowerment topics, and you can see my website and my offerings and the podcast. It's all there, Shaunna Lee on LinkedIn.
Oh, perfect. And we're going to put the links in the description box of this podcast today. So go ahead and click on over, everybody. Check out Shaunna Lee's materials. And, of course, check out the book as well. I think it's something that we can all learn from, whether we've gone through divorce or not. These are tips that can help us regardless if you're dealing with anger, or grief, or any of these other emotions Shaunna's mentioned to us. It's something we could all benefit from. Shaunna, I'm wondering if you have any last tips to the audience, especially for the authors out there who might be writing in similar topics. What would you recommend to them as they continue on with their journey?
I think the best piece of advice that I received was you cannot edit a blank page. So you have to write. That is the whole point. You can't finish a book until you write some pages.
I like that. Right. So you at least have to start it out, open that document, begin typing, get something down, and then you could move on into the next part. Just right.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I'll just add a little bit to that. A lot of people who want to write a book think that they need these massive amounts of time in order to complete a book. And in reality, a book can be written in 20 to 30 minute increments. And so, yes, there are times when you can sit down and write for hours, but you can get a lot done in just a little bit of time. So that's where I encourage people to write often.
Yeah, just write often, write a little bit as many times as you can, and so on and so forth, right? Just get out there and start practicing. And before we go today, do you happen to have a copy of the book with you today?
Oh, I do. Hold on one second. I do. It's right here.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, I keep it right, a stack of them right by my desk.
Oh, perfect. If you don't mind just showing us one more time, it looks very interesting. So is that, okay, so it's almost like a marker written just like, so what, move through it, almost scribbled right on. It's a really cool design. Did you have a say in it yourself?
Yeah. I did, actually. The cover design process was very interesting. I worked with a hybrid publisher, and I had given zero thought to what would the cover look like. And so they basically said, go out and find half a dozen examples of books that you like, that are kind of the vibe that you're going for, and also which ones you don't like. And so I knew I wanted to have a soft, feminine, pink is my favorite color, but I was writing it for women, so I wanted pink to be a big element of it. And they came back with something very similar to this, and I tweaked it slightly, and that's what we ended up with.
That's amazing. And it's really cool how you collaborated in that way. It's always good to know you have a say in it, but also you have some input from others. At the end of the day, we do need a team of people to help us make sure our book is the best it can be, and that's exactly what happened here. And I also recommend hybrid publishers. I think it's probably the best route. I mean, that's what we are here at Authors on Mission. We're hybrid because we're not the big traditional house that takes control of everything and makes you change up your book according to the regulations. You have a say in it. It's completely your book, but still having like the credible name and making sure it's all perfect for release, that sort of thing. It's a good balance.
Yeah, I thought it was the best first experience for me to publish using a hybrid publisher, just because it allowed me to utilize their expertise, right? So they could guide me through the parts of the process that I knew nothing about. And so that was really helpful. But then, I still did have quite a bit of independence and autonomy on what I wanted the book to be. Also, it was up to me to completely sell my book. So there were lots of pros and cons, but it was a great experience.
Yeah, definitely. And I would always highly recommend it to any authors, especially those just getting started. It's a wonderful way to get your name out there and get your brand built. So
absolutely.
Okay, well, Shaunna, this has been an incredible episode. I think that we've learned a lot about, yourself, your book, and of course, some amazing tips regarding divorce and the writing process as well. It's been a very, very insightful conversation. So I really appreciate you coming on today. I think that we've learned a lot.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Of course, of course. And to all of our listeners, if you're also ready to write your own empowering next chapter, go ahead and click on over to Shaunna's links where that you can connect with her, dive deeper into her work, stay up to date on her newest projects. And remember, whether you're also facing divorce or any major life transition, or if you really just want to step into your own power, So Your Divorce, So What is available wherever books are sold. So next time, just pick up the book and read that. And keep writing your story with courage, keep pursuing your mission with passion, and remember, you're not just surviving your chapters, you're authoring your comeback. We'll see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast.
This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.